Doing well. How are you, Dora?
I'm doing really well. Yeah.
So, what's arising for you these days?
Well, it's been really interesting to learn about the breath in so many different ways. I think that as a yoga teacher, we always tell our students to breathe, right? And we understand how important the breath is. But now, as I'm getting into learning about different aspects of yoga and meditation and pranayama, which are breath practices, that now I'm starting to really appreciate just how much depth and how important and significant our breath is to everything, not just in supporting our daily movements, not just about our daily uh, managing stress, our sleep, our emotions, our energy levels, our prana, right? That life force energy that animates everything. And so, yeah, the breath is a really huge, deep, and interesting topic that we can really look at it from all different perspectives. And then it's just wonderful to see how they all integrate and support each other.
I was so grateful when that year-long pranayama course came up for us. And it was around the time when I was finding more and more people I knew around me were having to use sleep apnea machines or were starting to go for those sleep testings. And I just kind of was starting to believe that I guess that's our fate. We live too long. And so all of us are going to have to get this machine. And then eventually, and I know some other friends who are, a little bit older, and both of them now have a sleep apnea machine. So everybody just has a sleep apnea machine. And then after reading that Breathe book with James Nestor, like, I think for me, you know, and always as an educator, it always goes back for me to teaching the young people. I feel like breathing and a lot of the things we've been learning through iRest integrative restoration are actually more important than some of the academics that we focus on. We need to know how to breathe properly because it is our force. It is, it starts our life and it's the last, we take one last breath before our physical body passes. So, yes, we need to know how to breathe. And I so appreciate that James Nestor went around interviewing such experts in breath, athletes, coaches, deep sea swimmers, choir directors. So for me, it was so life changing to come across that year long that we did with iRest.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to talk about when it comes to the breath because, there's the physiology of breathing, which is really interesting and important. But there's also the energetics when it comes to, when we look at the subtle body, when we look into, like you say, the prana, the life force energy, and the chakras, and the breath is really a way for us to tap into the more subtle body, and the breath is it's such an interesting process in that this is the only process that the breath has sort of one foot in the conscious and unconscious. It's a bridge between the heart and the mind. And so it's just fascinating to see, all the science behind the physiology of breathing, and then also to see how the breath is linked to the subtle energy system that often is talked about in the Eastern traditions, and to see how those two viewpoints of the breath, they are not in conflict with each other. They actually do come together and integrate. Um, and the understanding in both sort of the Western and Eastern um, knowledge or information just gives you a whole new appreciation of how powerful our breath is. And we often don't think about it this way because we're like, well, of course, we're all breathing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive. But just because we're moving air in and out of the body, a lot of people don't realize that when we even just do something as little as bringing mindfulness to the breath, that changes the quality of breathing. That changes how our nervous system um, is working, and how we extend our exhalation versus our inhalation can change our autonomic nervous system to a more fight or flight mode or a more relaxed mode. And so there's so much with the breath that we don't even understand, and it's right at our disposal. We have to breathe, right? It's not that something we forget about. It's we're already doing it. So why would we not maximize um, our quality of life by improving our quality of breath?
I know it sounds like it's such a basic thing, but I'm really grateful that a lot of schools bring it in now as a practice so that students can realize that they can harness it. So, for example, in gym class, especially with the little ones, right? So they can just feel the different breathing spaces in the body, and especially the lower breathing space, because a lot of times children don't know how to self regulate quite yet. And if they can learn how to just even breathe deeper into the belly and maybe exhale a little bit longer, it's amazing how it can change. They don't have to know that it's, the science behind it exactly, but if they can feel what it is in the body. So we'll do that and we'll put like maybe whatever, little bean bag on their belly, because that, it'll bring center their focus to look at their belly as it goes up and down, and they can notice it. And it seems like a little thing, but we weren't taught that when we were their age. And so I'm really grateful that now it's becoming incorporated, and one of the schools I go to every morning, the principal will come online and or come on the announcements and lead them in, breath practice, so that at least, they're thinking about it. And there's other ways that are they can lengthen their breath or focus their energy, even, using their fingers or using their arms. But still, it's this mindful practice, this mindful breathing that and even as teachers, because a lot of adults haven't learned these things either. So although they think they're doing it for the children, they themselves are gaining these benefits without even realizing it. So it's so powerful, just knowing how to breathe.
Yeah, and the thing is, when we're stressed out, we kind of take on a certain posture in the body, and we tap into a certain breathing pattern. And, because some people would be like, well, why do we need to be taught how to breathe? Don't we know how to breathe? If our body is always learning to come back to homeostasis, wouldn't we naturally come to a breath that is healthful for us? And actually, no, because we are living in a society that is very stressful. And so our nervous system is really um, dysregulated for a lot of people, that we're kind of stuck in the fight or flight response, um, just put it simply, where we're stressed. Our nervous system is stressed, and we take on certain postures, and we are sedentary, and we sit in front of the computer, or we're driving, or whatever it is, we sit and we start to take even a certain posture, we slump, and we kind of, round our spine, and we have this kind of shoulder forward posture. And we may not think so much of it, but all of these things contribute to how freely we're able to breathe. And when we're in that fight or flight mode, our breathing changes as well to kind of emphasize that stress response. And so when we're, and stress is not bad, we need that. But because we're in a society where sort of the physical dangers that we might encounter back in, caveman days, or it's not the same level, not the same kinds of threat that we feel. The kind of stress that we feel are psychological now, things that we can't get away from. So we are chronically stressed, and we chronically put ourselves into certain breathing patterns. We chronically put ourselves into certain postures. We are chronically inactive. Like all of these things um, start to set us up into really poor breathing habits. And then we get comfortable in them, not because they're good for us, but we've just gotten so used to them that we think it's normal. But nothing about it is normal. And then we start to, have other symptoms show up for us, whether it be physical or psychological symptoms. And we don't stop to think that, oh, maybe the breath is linked to all of this. I mean, everything is linked. So it's not, I'm not saying that the breath is the only reason why we have certain health conditions, but sometimes, we take it for granted that okay, we're breathing, so it must be fine. But the subtle changes in our breath, like we said before, even just bringing mindfulness will shift your breath. And these are tools that are so simple. You don't need any equipment. You don't need to be in a meditation. You don't need anything to just bring mindfulness to your breath, right? We can do it in conversation with someone. We can do it while we're cooking, while we're driving. But just starting to change our breathing habits, we start to change our posture, we start to change our energy level, we start to change all sorts of things. And so breathing really is a really powerful practice that is really underrated. Like people don't, even people who have a yoga practice, right? Even though they're reminded to breathe, or to be mindful, to connect breath with movement, there's still such, I think, a lack in terms of awareness and the just how important and significant the breath is.
Yeah, there's this disconnect. We were talking about this with the body, and I feel like there's a disconnect as well with this such, life-giving energy, which is our breath. So, people don't realize if you're heavily panting, maybe that's telling you something, right? That's some kind of messenger from the body. Either maybe you're working too hard, and maybe you need to listen and take a break at that moment, or um, they just don't realize that connection with our energy. And I always find it interesting when Richard was telling us about how, like, the mantras, they were made so skillfully so that the breath practice naturally comes from, we can naturally breathe in a certain way skillfully while we're doing these mantras. Like, they were so cleverly interwoven into them. And same with the mudras, directing energy. So it's such a beautiful thing. Sometimes, if we can trust, at least maybe in these mantras or mudras or listening to the body, it's amazing how we can benefit from it in a very natural way. We don't need to think about what we're doing, and just practice it, and interweave it with our life. So sometimes I feel like they're really clever in how they've done that with the mantras and mudras and breath practices that we use in yoga. Yeah.
Yeah. And Richard, Jen means Dr. Richard Miller, who's the creator of iRest protocol. But yeah, like one of the things um, that Richard talked about was the exhalation. The longer exhalation really helps us to tap into the parasympathetic nerve system, which is the rest and relax response. And so, anytime that we are talking, singing, making sound, chanting mantras, whatnot, we are extending our exhalation. And so, it doesn't have to be a yoga practice or a meditation or breath or pranayama practice. It could be that if you enjoy singing, sing. These are really great exercises for extending the exhalation and to and then there's a whole other area that we can get into with sound and vibrations in the body, which can be very healing and nourishing for the body and mind. But just as simple as slowly extending the exhalation and being able to train the body to tolerate more carbon dioxide is actually going to be very helpful in improving health. And I know Richard talked about it in our pranayama course, but also in the book that you recommended, Breathe by James Nestor, he talks a lot about that as well. Because sometimes, we think about, oh, we need to oxygenate our bodies, we need to oxygenate our cells. And so there's so much focus on oxygen, and we think that breathing more is better for us, but in fact, what we really need is to breathe less. And that's actually going to help us to get more oxygen into our cells, as we breathe less. And so for those who might be interested in how that works, as you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that makes no sense at all. Um, Definitely go ahead and read the book, Breathe by James Nestor. But just in a very kind of in a nutshell, what happens is, oxygen that gets that travel in our blood cells, and they reach the different parts of our bodies that need oxygen. The oxygen need to exchange with the carbon dioxide in order to leave the bloodstream to oxygenate your cells in the body. And so if you don't have a high level of carbon dioxide, there's you actually don't release a lot of oxygen from the blood to the cells. And so for us to start to build up our CO2, our carbon dioxide tolerance, now with every breath, the red blood cells that travel to the different areas, more of the oxygen can exchange with more of the carbon dioxide. So there's actually more oxygenation in the cells. So breathing is not just happening in your lungs, right? We're really trying to feed every cell in the body. And so what matters is that the oxygen is really getting to all the other areas. And for that to happen, carbon dioxide is important. And what's really interesting is that there's a lot of research to show that a lot of people actually have a really low tolerance for carbon dioxide. And that just goes to show that, us as a society that is pretty chronically stressed out, that we're really emphasizing maybe that inhalation more so than the exhalation. So we actually don't have a lot of tolerance in our body for higher levels of carbon dioxide.
You make me think of the experience that we've done, which is the mouth, putting the mouth tape just sort of
Mm.
to tone the muscles in the nose so that we can get more of that nitric oxide. Also, that's only found in the nose. Like these are things that we didn't know about. I always thought that mouth breathing was fine, even though it sounded awful. But learning now that we can actually strengthen those muscles and that it's much more beneficial to breathe through the nostrils, things like that. I really feel important that, hopefully everybody can realize the importance of actually learning about how breathing works in our human body.
Yeah, and they're not really, it doesn't have to be complicated breathing practices. Just like you said, breathe. Can we notice where we're breathing? Maybe we're not even aware. Are we breathing through the nose or through the mouth? Can we breathe through the nose? Why not? Or, like if you're not doing it, why not? Is there something that's preventing you from breathing through the nose? Um, and at night, are you breathing through the nose or through the mouth? Because you talked about your friends being on all of these CPAP machines. It is because, well, there are many reasons, right? But a common one is actually, like you said, we're not toning the muscles. We're so used to mouth breathing that some of the muscles in the throat have gotten lax and they kind of fall onto themselves, and we have the sleep apnea. When we start breathing through the nose, we start to tone up those muscles again. And so um, it has been shown that people who do tape the mouth so that they have to breathe through the nose, initially it might be, a bit uncomfortable, but as you start to tone up that area, then the sleep apnea problem actually just, can be resolved, which is pretty amazing. And the thing is, like you say, when we sleep, we may be unconscious. So you might be thinking, well, how do I breathe through the nose when I'm sleeping? One thing is, whatever we do during our day really sets us up for the nighttime. So, as we start to bring more awareness into the way that we're breathing during the day and coming back to a way of breathing that's more healthful for us, that kind of, there's a better chance that that gets carried on in your sleep as well. And so, bring that awareness and conscious awareness or mindfulness in your breathing can be so beneficial in so many ways.
I agree. And I feel, maybe this could be as a tip, as people start to learn how to harness their breath for everyday life and they realize the importance of our energy and our breath and that connection, like deepening the exhale, even to bring you more in that sort of calming, more parasympathetic nervous system response. then it will become a habit. It'll become a natural habit that your body will go to, right? So maybe if you can, starting to bring in some of these practices of like deepening the exhale, and as you're more conscious and noticing how you're breathing, especially in challenging situations, you'll see more and more, maybe there's this pattern where you are more in the sympathetic nervous system. Maybe you're breathing much more heavily, maybe more in the upper breathing space. But yeah, I guess it's that mindfulness piece that we keep bringing in, as we make that a habit and make that with an intention to be mindful of all the different bits and pieces that make us who we are as humans. It'll help us in all the different ways. They all sort of layer on top of each other and helping one another. So yeah, with intention, maybe bringing in that exhale, make that when you wake up, bring that in, notice your breaths, even just for a minute, deepening the exhale just to start getting into that practice. Or before you go to bed, even, bring in again that breath practice, noticing as you deepen the exhale, or even feeling each breathing space. So you can start to really in the body feel the sensation of the breath. Yeah. Do you have a suggestion as well?
Yeah, I think, to go along with what you were saying about the breathing spaces. So the breathing spaces, you can think of, three sections, right? So you can think of the lower belly as a breathing space, as a lower breathing space. The area in the solar plexus is the middle breathing space, and then the upper chest, rib cage is the upper breathing space. And it might be a very interesting inquiry just to check out where you tend to feel the breath when you're breathing. Do you tend to feel the breath mostly in the upper breathing space or the lower breathing space, or and then it could just be a bit of an exploration to say, okay, well, if I'm always breathing in the upper breathing space, can I now focus maybe 5 to 10 breaths on bringing the breath and movement in the lower breathing space? And then can I maybe bring it to the middle breathing space? And then breathe, and then you can bring it back to the upper breathing space to compare. And then you might even just, play it like a scale. Can I now feel up and then the middle and then lower? And then you might even just play around. Can I just start to isolate different areas? And then it may not even stop there. Can you imagine breathing into your fingertips, so breathing into your toes? And of course, the air is not getting to your fingers or toes, but because breath is linked to the subtle body as well. So that as we start to bring our attention to certain areas in the body with the breath, you might actually start to sense into that underlying life force energy that you are, really feeling that flow in the body. And that could be a really beautiful experience as well.
So let us know how your energy practice goes and leave us some comments at the bottom. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dora.
Thanks, Jen. Bye now.